Hi, my name is Yvonne Livingston, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at the Urban Youth Trauma Center. And today I have a guest with me, and we're going to talk about what a social worker does because all too often, I've kind of like thought in my head what a social worker is, and I see that I'm missing some pieces. And so Amanda here is one of my colleagues at the center, and we work so well together. And when I asked her to do this, of course, she agreed, and I absolutely love you for doing it. So, Amanda, please introduce yourself to everyone.
Well, hi, thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Amanda Myers, and I am a licensed clinical social worker here at UI Health. And I work with Yvonne in one clinic in particular, our pediatric stress and anxiety disorders clinic. I also work in our pediatric mood disorders clinic here as well at UI Health.
Okay. And so, Amanda, when we were talking about what a social worker does and all of the different roles, because, I always like wanted some, different services, but didn't really know who to talk to as a young mom, right? And then this is in hindsight now. So, all my children are grown. But it was really difficult being a single mom and, trying to figure out all of the services that are available, for parents who, may experience homelessness, joblessness, need transportation, even someone to talk to, like how are these services, done for people that are in those type of situations?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why I became a social worker, because I feel like it feels like a lot of different services are in different silos, and I feel like what I learned that social work was like kind of your essentially like a one-stop shop, someone who understands or who generally understands mental health care, resources in the community, housing, different school issues, public health issues. So it kind of really appealed to me when I was deciding what I wanted to do for a career. So I really wanted to do child psychotherapy. That was something I knew I wanted to do. So I thought that counseling was a good fit for me, and I wanted to be maybe a licensed counselor. But then I had a mentor who I got to see help people in very direct ways that wasn't just psychotherapy. And I found that she was a social worker, and I realized, wow, social workers aren't just someone who talks to your kid about X, Y, and Z, or there was a stigma when I first heard about social work that was like the welfare worker, the person who works with to DCFS and unfortunately takes children away from their families, and I didn't want to be a part of that system. But when I learned how much more social workers can do beyond that system, it made me really attracted to this field so I can best help people.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't know that the social workers did some of the things that you were saying, like working with DCFS and, and kind of like I would say that, that's how I understood that, what social workers did because of my children, when they were in school and different services and after school programs, things like that. And then kind of bringing them into a space where, what's going on at home and, are you okay type of thing. And depending on what the child said, you get a phone call or a visit. And so in my Black Studies classes, when I was taking those, what you were saying previously was, the welfare visits, when they would come to your home and you couldn't have this or that in order to receive something. And so that was, but I never associated it like that for the visiting. So there was more or less like DCFS coming into your home, after then, I don't know, after the separation of something like that, just to check and see if, the child was safe in the home. But yeah, that's really interesting to now make those connections of how those services work. And it's to help the families, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's kind of the way I viewed it was like, I didn't want to take away anything from families. My job I've always wanted to provide more to families. I've had my own situations in life and had people close with me struggling with a variety of things. And it just always felt like help was just beyond reach, And now being a social worker, I'm literally paid to find resources for people, I get frustrated, I get confused, I get impatient because it's such a hard system. And so I feel like I'm honored to be the one getting paid so other people don't have to go through that, you know?
So what services can you provide for a family should they need a life-giving service, you know?
Yeah. So me in particular right now, I can talk about, you know, me specifically and social workers in general too. You know, me specifically now, I provide mainly psychotherapy services to children. And also my background is actually in community mental health and community services. So before I even became a social worker, I worked at a job center. You know, I worked with people coming home from prison and getting back, you know, connected with the community and getting help getting documents. You know, documents are so hard to get for people, IDs, birth certificates, that sort of thing. And, you know, throughout my experiences, it kind of led me to this point where I'm able to offer, you know, specific mental health services, but I don't just do therapy. Like if you ask any of my clients now, like if there's a resource that pops up in conversation with a parent that I'm working with their child, I'm not going to be like, well, I do therapy only. It's like, no, if you need, like, let's do this. You need transportation to get to your appointments. A lot of insurance now has options for transportation for medical appointments and discounts as a medical appointment. So that's something we can talk more about. If there's in need of any public assistance help, any like clothing help, any food pantry help, there's different databases. You know, I'm happy to connect my families with. For a long time before this position, I worked at Catholic Charities, and I did not even know how many services Catholic Charities offers to everyone in the community, you know, despite any background. And I didn't realize that before working there, that it's open, like they have a lot of different services for clothing, for food, housing. They offer a lot of housing support. So that's a huge resource that I use for the families I work with now, since I know of their services. So yeah, that's kind of how I, you know, specifically try to help people now in my role. And in general, I think social workers are trained to look at systems and family systems and systems you live in and systems that affect you beyond what's the disease model that sometimes comes in healthcare, like what's wrong with you. No, it's more like what's happening to you. So I think social workers in general are really good at being like, wow, of course your child's maybe acting out more in school. Like right now, you guys are struggling with these limited resources. So maybe let's try to figure that out first and connect you with that, you know, and maybe you can start with therapy right away because you're not, you know, maybe there's more stabilization that's needed to help a family, you know?
And I like that you know, you put it like that, right? Of course, your child is this because you're going through this, you know, and life doesn't happen in a vacuum. And so when these things happen to us, you know, the first thing, right? And I'm going to speak about me, you know, when it happened to me when I became homeless. And so the first thing you think about is how can you secure your child and, you know, and still continue on into, you know, what they would call a normal environment, right? You know, still making them go to school and, you know, doing all these different things. And in their head, you know, they're thinking like, okay, I don't have my own space. You know, I don't have a safe space to lay my head. And so when we talk about, you know, those type of things that people go through as a whole, you know, I understand, you know, because I've been there, you know, and so, and whenever housing gets threatened, you know, for anyone, you know, that's a really, really big thing. And it does cause mental stress, you know, for you not to have a roof over your head, you know. So that's really huge for me to hear you say that there's help for this, that there are spaces where people can receive, you know, help, but, you know, finding out where to go and even being brave enough to having the courage, you know, to come out and say, you know, I need these services, I need this help, you know, and understanding that when they do come in, you know, and talk to you like this, that's a very vulnerable position, you know, and it's often overlooked as, you know, somebody want to call it resilience, but that's very powerful to do, you know, to admit that you do need some help and you need some assistance.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that I've really, over my years of working as a social worker, I've really gotten to meet some wonderful people who, in my mind, I see this resiliency, but I also understand that like they're trusting me with this very vulnerable moment in their lives, and the reality is that, while I know how to find resources, maybe because of my position and my career, I also know that it's still hard, like even to find, there are limited resources still. And so it's always been hard when someone comes to me, vulnerable and need and wanting this to find some service that's going to help, this life-saving service. And our hands are tied because every service comes with eligibility requirements. Every service comes with X, Y, and Z you have to do. So, I will say, and I feel like I just now realized this, that I feel pretty confident that I wouldn't say an expert in Chicago resources, but I feel pretty proficient that after all of these years, that I at least know how to get information. And that took me a master's degree and then years and years and years and years fighting the system, figuring it out, working through it, making calls, getting turned down, being frustrated. And like, again, I can't imagine families going through their hardest moments, having to do all that themselves. Like I get so frustrated when I call a service asking about a family and they're like, you need to have that family call. Like you're kind of enabling them by calling for them. Let me tell you, it takes me everything in my power to just remain calm so I can connect with this person and get them to realize that it's not about enabling, it's about helping in this situation. They're already trying so hard. I'm being paid for this. This is a job for me. And I hate to say it like that, but I have a privilege to figure you out where they are like struggling and trying to figure you out. Of course you say it in a way that's going to be received well because you want to help people, but that happens so often.
Yeah, because when it was me, and I'm going to be completely honest here, I was not in the headspace to fill out paperwork, let alone, Ray, you get to a space and then somebody tells you, okay, this is what you have to do. And so when you're filling out paperwork, they're asking you some very personal questions. And, you are already in this moment. And so, you can say, well, if you want the help and you can, fill out the paperwork. But what goes on in your head, as you're doing this, at least what went on in my head was I was inadequate. I need some services that should not be this way, but here I am, so that's what's going on in my head as I'm writing my name, and so it gets to be that quick, right? That you do need some assistance and it's okay, to have somebody help you out and be there to help represent who you say you need to be in that moment. You're vulnerable right now, and that support honestly is so huge because when there was a woman that helped me and I guess it was a case manager, and she kind of took over, right? And I was so appreciative because I was thinking to myself, what do I write? What do I put here, to say how and why I need the help in the first place. And so she was like, here, let me assist you, let me help, because, even when you don't have an address, at least it's how it was back in the day. I'm not sure how it is now. I haven't had to use homeless services, thank God. But you have to have an address in order to receive some services, which is like the whole point, right? You're like, I'm trying to get it, but I need these things, in order to get it. And they're saying, well, no, I can't give it to you because you don't have an address.
That is exactly how it works. It's this catch-22 situation that people find themselves in. They're already so stressed out, so tired. And then having these providers think that they're, like trying to get help from someone to do this and they can't do it themselves. Like, no, they cannot, because your system is so complex. And so I mean, I've had a lot of very fortunate opportunities. Like I remember once when I worked at a employment resource center, we had our clients use that address often, like send your mail here. This you can use this address, I'm not sure if that's how we would do it now, but we had that flexibility back then to be able to provide someone that. And especially when you're trying to get an ID, but in order to get you're homeless though, but you need to have mail, you need proof of residency, and like where do you have that sent though if you're homeless? So we were able to help, and there's now more services for that sort of thing, thankfully, but that's a barrier. That's a huge barrier. And it's like, you constantly have to be problem solving this. And I personally love doing that. But again, I have the privilege to have a job where I am housed and I get the opportunity to be creative about how to problem solve these hard issues that people are facing, that people don't understand.
Mm-hmm. And because I'll tell you one thing, Amanda, and I'm being very frank here. I understand poverty. A lot of people do, right? Not having enough, you know, to live your life as you need to or want to, right? Because that's what it is, right? And at least that's what it was for me, poverty. And so poverty is a huge barrier to a lot of people to receive the things. Because if you, I mean, let's just face it, if you had the resources, you would need, you know, the services, right? And so when you get to that point where you need something like that, you know, especially if you wasn't born into it, you know, I was born into it. Uh, you know, it does become it can be hard to navigate because you don't know how the system works.
Right.
You know, and the reason why I offer, you know, so much knowledge and wisdom around a lot of these topics and subjects is because I've been through it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm knowledgeable because of my lived experience, nothing else.
Yeah.
You know, and so when I speak from that perspective and, you know, and I share information with people on different things, I do, it's a resource. So you point people to, you know, where to go. And there's a lot of ground roots organizations that do this type of, you know, they do these type of things. And so as I'm learning, as I'm jumping in myself, you know, where and how we can be helpful to each other, you know, by sharing the network and sharing the different things, because I also understand too, and this is what someone told me, that nonprofit organizations, you know, they have to pay bills, they have to pay people, you know, and so sometimes there isn't enough money to go around, you know, to help a lot of people that are in need, because, you know, this is how the system works. But a system that I grew up with, because again, I didn't need, I'm sorry, I didn't have all of the help, right, that I needed. And so I had to lean on other people, a community as space, you know, so church was, you know, my leaning space. Um, and it was really very, very helpful, you know, for a single mom to receive assistance, you know, from a church family. You know, that's an extension of the community, you know, of a family, right? And so these are the type of things that are in our communities, you know, for a reason and for a purpose, you know, to catch people, you know, that don't exactly fit into a system that says that, you know, you have to have this, this, and this in order to receive this, and you don't have it, the frustration, you know, and I'm gonna tell you, I was in a bad headspace sometimes, you know, because of that. And so having an avenue where you can go to, you know, have something different to still supply your needs is what I did and why I'm still here, you know, to give this type of testimony, because these are, you know, when I'm sitting at the table and I'm listening to some of the parents and the children that come in, you know, I'm like, man, it's my story. Man, you know, it's so touching and moving, and to see everybody come together, you know, and provide these wraparound services is why I love what I do, you know, as a community engagement coordinator. It's just really connecting with people and saying, what do you need? It's a human being, you know, it's nature, it's nurture, right? And so what do you think about how community is able to come together and then begin to support one another? Because as we have children, you know, and their families and stuff come in and we see those dynamics, we say, well, yeah, the children need services, but the parents could really use, you know, some services too. And then 1 or 2 sessions with the parent, with the child can be, you know, it could be life altering, right?
Definitely. I think it definitely can be. Um, yeah, I feel like a couple of different things are coming to mind right now. I feel like one thing was this idea of church, and I love this. I love that, like, I feel like I always think about church as the original social work, you know, and now
Mm-hmm.
there's been like all this growth, and there's still a lot of church-based, faith-based organizations, all creeds, all religions that I work with closely, because that's a big place for community to come to gather, you know, for not to be too many strings attached. Because unfortunately, not-for-profits tend to have a lot of strings attached because there's grants, there's documentation, there's reporting, you know, so it gets really tricky. So the idea about bringing people together and, you know, building community around like sharing knowledge, like you were saying, you know, I feel like, God, it's a bigger question. I wish I knew what the best answer was for that. But for me, I know that sharing what I know, anyone, anytime, they know, friends, coworkers, patients, their families can text me, call me, email me, and ask about a resource, and I'll probably find it for you pretty quickly. You know, that's my way of, I think, building communities is by sharing information. And I hope that I can kind of help people spread that information then beyond. And that's kind of been my goal about how to build community and just, you know, have a spot where people come together and be able to share all this information. So you're not, you know, having to figure it all out on your own. I don't want that. If I already figure it out, then you don't need to figure it out. I already figured it out. So why do you need to call and do all that, you know?
Yeah, that's like trying to reinvent a wheel that's already here.
Exactly. It's like people have already done that. So let's just, I wish there was an easier way. But a part of my role, which isn't directly connected to helping community, it's called Illinois Doc Assist. So Illinois Doc Assist is a program here that's provider to provider consultation. So it's another way where I find resources for primary care providers in all parts of the state of Illinois. So like in rural parts or underserved parts that don't have a lot of resources, they'll call us up and say, we have a patient, we have a family who needs school-based services, or who needs mental health care, who needs job and placement and employment opportunities. And so that's part of a way too that I feel like I've been able to use my skill set to help the broader Illinois community by providing these resources that then are given directly to their patients. So I really feel like that's a good thing that people are aware of. I tell patients about it when they call. I'm like, you should have your doctor call us because it's free, and your doctor then can get, typically they call and talk to one of our child psychiatrists, the doctor does, about, you know, because child psychiatry is very limited in the rest of Illinois. And so they usually call and consult with one of the psychiatrists, but then talk to us about resources. So, you know, if you ever find people in different parts of the state who need resources, I'm happy to connect with their primary care providers. So that's another way that I'm trying to build community.
That is really great, Amanda, because I didn't know that you were doing that. So see, I told you, like, when you have like these conversations and you start like really connecting and talking about different things, like the help pops up, you know, the resources pops up, and you get to, you know, share this type of information so that communities know, you know, they know that if I have a problem, if something pops up, there is a solution, because, you know, these funds and different things and different institutions are set aside for, you know, the people who are in need. And when you're in those type of moments, it does take a professional, or, you know, anyone that cares, honestly, because, you know, we can all do some healing work, right? We can all see when another human being is in some form of pain, and we can say, hey, like, what's going on? You know,
It's my hope for people to do that. Yes.
Right. Because, you know, a lot of times, you know, that's what's needed, you know, a hug, a smiling face, you know, soothing voice to say, you know, it's going to be okay when you're dealing with, you know, those difficult things like that. Because honestly, I think I cried on a bunch of social workers, you know, sometimes, you know, when the question was, how are you doing? You know, because your children get taken care of, right? And they try and give them as much support as they can, right? But sometimes the support needs to go a little bit up, you know, just a little bit up, because it's like we see, you know, we'll see you maybe occasionally, right, when there's an issue with a child, but the child may see you every day, but the parent doesn't, right? So the child is getting help, but the parent isn't. You know, and so that creates, you know, a bottleneck for sure.
100%. I never work unless there's some specific circumstances where I'll work with maybe a teenager more one-on-one, but I always, always, always include parents in the services I provide because I can't, what good is what I'm teaching, the skills I'm teaching these young people, you know, they're with their families far more often overall. And if their parents are struggling, if they need support, then how are they going to help continue the skills that I'm building with this child, you know? So yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that more clinicians should think that way too, that the parent needs to be solid because they're like they're your co-trainer. They're your, you know, I always think of the parent like I need you to be good because I know if you're not good, we're not going to get anywhere with this child. So it's like a more of a this is actually the best way to help the child to make sure the parent's good, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now since we understand that as a profession, a lot of us, right, that the child parent relationship is essential and that, you know, everybody needs to work together because when sitting at the Urban Youth Trauma Center, I've seen some amazing work. I've seen you all like really wrap around, you know, families and get that support in before a child harms themselves, you know, before a parent, you know, has to have a difficult conversation, you know. And so that's what's needed, you know, more so than ever, you know, in our communities, you know, especially as the weather starts to warm up when we can see an increase in things, right? But then a lot of people won't report or won't do this because it's warm outside, you know, and so um, those type of situations when they pop up, you know, and say, well, I can go over here, I can go over there, but I just really want our community to know what's out here, you know, what's accessible, you know, and you can really make that phone call. You can come to the Urban Youth Trauma Center's website where a lot of this information is in the pediatric stress and disorders clinic. You know, there are a number of resources that are on these websites. And like Amanda just said, you know, the public thing about UIC is this: everybody is accessible at one point in time or another. You know, even if it's just to ask some intake question, you know, to call in and say, you have this information on your website. You know, I called, they said this. Do you have something else? What else is available? You know, and to get that help, you know, because, you know, once a no, sometimes when people hear no once, they don't want to hear no again. And so that's when that support is really important, you know, and I like that you said that sometimes people just need someone else to step in. It's not enabling, right?
Yeah.
When that stress is heightened like that. I don't see it as enabling. I would have wanted somebody to step in, you know, to do that because it's a lot to do when you're under stress, right?
Definitely.
Okay. So Amanda, what I want to do now is have you, right, in whatever way that you choose to, you know, because I really like how you know, when we're sitting at the table, you know, at the round table with a square, in the clinic, how you do your work and how you include families in on the holistic approach, right? Of saying, Mom, are you okay if this, you know, like how you bridge those gaps together like that, those tough conversations, because I've seen you work.
Yeah.
You know, you have those teenagers and that parent, and it looks like that contention is getting ready to happen. So give us some tips on what you do. Like, what are you thinking when you do that?
Well, I'm thinking, again, I'm thinking I don't truly know their experience. So I try to kind of tread lightly. But I kind of recognize if I notice a moment's hard, if I am a clinician who's been trained and noticing this is a hard conversation, or I've noticed some tension, or I've noticed mom is really having to really support this child who's not doing well, and that's a lot of work, you know. You know, I try to just point out to them that I see all the work they're already doing, you know, and I kind of feel like I try to let them know that, you know, even though I may look differently, I may come from a different place, that I see you and I see what you're already doing, and that I'm not giving you something more than what you're already doing. I'm just helping ease the tension, or helping ease some of the skills you're already using, or the the strengths you already have. I'm trying to promote those, So I feel like I always try to go in first with appreciating what's already there in a family, the strengths already there in parents, And then I think it's then kind of more easy to say, also, what support do you have? This is hard. What are you doing to help yourself? Because not that you need help, but you deserve help. And so I kind of approach it in that way. It's in that I feel like I get a pretty good response, when I try to think of it that way and try to take each person individually and in their situations. So that's kind of how I try to do it.
And in my head, when you said that, I said preach, because that's the truth right there, right? That parents do, they is necessary, for caregivers and parents, because parenting isn't just one thing these days. A lot of people are stepping into the roles to help children. And so caregivers, giving care, is what we do too in the clinic. So thank you so much, Amanda, for, your time and your expertise in what a social worker does. And should anything pop up after this, we know where we can go.
Yes, you're more than welcome to come to me. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Until next time on the Parent Talk, if you all have any questions on what it is we do here, please go to our website, the Urban Youth Trauma Center, and the Pediatric and Stress Disorders Clinic. I had to get those acronyms together.
And I've been doing it. I still struggle.
At UIC, and we're right in the community. Till next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.